Open banking has been moving really fast. A lot of Italian founders working on open banking solution. Open banking in general is a framework allowing to share financial information that allows essentially like third parties to build on top of APIs from banks and from other financial institutions without the need of basically being a bank.
We are in the maturing phase of open banking. So PSD2, as you said, opened up the gates. And the market was flooded with solutions, with APIs and providers of solutions to enable other operators to integrate banking-like services within their ecosystems. Then we had probably a kind of a consolidation event. There were some players acquired by other banks, for example.
Some of the latest news of last week. So starting from open banking in general, I would say, I think it's interesting to see. So starting from let's start from the news and then let's work our way back. So Submarine-based BKN301 raising 21.5 million in a Series B round from CDP VC, Azimuth, Semest, and a series of other investors. So very interesting. I mean, in the sense that open banking has been moving really fast. They have a very quick growth in terms of market. And there are a lot of Italian founders working on open banking solution. And this trend has moved extremely quickly and intensifying. Well, we don't talk about that too much. I think AI is really like kind of covering every other moves, but yeah, it's very, very interesting. So starting from the news, so I just to give some context, so BKN301 provides different kind of services for third parties in an open banking framework. So just to give some ideas on how exactly what we're talking about. Open banking in general, we refer to essentially a provider. Let's say it's a framework allowing to share financial information that allows essentially like third parties to build on top of APIs from banks and from other financial institutions without the need of basically being a bank. That's I'm just giving the rough idea. I don't know if you have a better definition. I'm just starting from the basic because there are a few layers here.
No, I agree. It's not that simple. So if you start slicing out what a bank does, you find a lot of stuff. So it's not that obvious actually. But please go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was looking into some basics and what people need to know actually when approaching open banking. I think there are a few things. So first of all, I think that API are definitely one of the primary elements to look into. So basically API is essentially the protocol with which you can exchange data. And open banking really refers to a lot of times to API-based solution facilitating secure data sharing between the banking structure and this third-party providers. So the TPPs, so-called TPPs, which are essentially every founder building on top of banking data of some forms. So I think that's the first sort of takeaway to kind of introduce in the topic. Another element which I think is worth mentioning is that there is a very powerful directive from the European Union, which is the Payment Service Directive 2, PSD2, back in 2015, which essentially is what triggered and accelerated founders building in fintech, especially in open banking. So that's another very, very powerful acronym to know and an element to understand when talking about open banking. So having said that, essentially, there are two kinds of providers, and that's from the directive. Essentially, people working essentially in exchanging information, so-called account information service provider. So essentially, third parties that collect information from official banks and then manipulating them and providing services on top of that. And then the second kind is the payment initiation service provider, which is essentially third parties building through API, but also including the payment part. So these are the macro distinction in open banking, and basically people in fintech working in open banking is essentially can be split into these like two categories, which are identified via the directive. couple of data which I think are interesting is that think about this, Nick. Like 2021 in Italy, there were 13 third-party providers. So not many. There are like some providers of open banking services. In 2025, I think we are at about 131. So interesting growth, fast growth, and kind of much aligned with what's happening worldwide, where people estimate like a total growth of the market for open banking growing 25.8% per year. So that's it's a fast-moving market. It's big, and there are a ton of Italian founders working in open banking solution. So very interesting. I don't know what is your feel for this year or maybe last year, if you saw some movements in the open banking in general. But we talked about that before, and I think there are some gems here.
No, super interesting, Jack. Thank you. Well, I think that we are in the maturing phase of open banking. So PSD2, as you said, opened up the gates, and the market was flooded with solutions, with APIs and providers of solutions to enable other operators to integrate banking-like services within their ecosystems. Then we had probably a kind of a consolidation event. There were some players acquired by other banks, for example. Trésor was acquired by Société Générale, to name one. Just a few remain independent. Trulier is one. BKN301 is more recent than the others, so it's still independent. I don't know about Yapili. Maybe it's still independent. And now we are probably in the maturing phase where interesting use cases are emerging. So one of the keywords of the last few years was embedded finance. So the basic idea is to put a financial product within a broader other products. And the PSD2, the banking APIs enable this kind of financialization of other stuff. And that was interesting. It unlocked quite a few opportunities. We invested in at least one embedded finance solution with our funds, and that's super interesting. I think that's a lot of opportunities there. If you manage to put together the service, whatever is the main product, and the financial part, so the banking part. It's not just 1 + 1 = 2 all the time, but if you think it through, you can build very interesting solutions for your customers.
Yeah, what I've been noticing also is that this is probably one of the vertical where Italy is very on top of things. So Banca d'Italia is very providing a lot of interesting and forward-looking guidelines and allowing providers to actually build. So it's been really in the scope of what probably also the government wants to push. So that's a very nice sort of way to move like a vertical particularly fast. On top of that, I think also non-obvious providers are also leveraging the power of open banking, talking about like Poste, for example. So the Italian postal services, which has been really forward-looking also in terms of their technology. So very, very interesting. Insurance companies also are leveraging that. Unipolsai is definitely like another one. And as you mentioned, Fabric basically is tightly connected with Banca Sella. Definitely one of the most advanced bank in Italy has been moving their step. Yeah, what is your feel here?
I mean, it's a huge opportunity. We talk about it a little bit here and there, right? So that banks didn't want to be banks anymore, at least up until there was the zero interest rates period. And that was, being a bank was hard in some sense. And they started trying to be a tech company. And there you see Sella, for example, but other banks to start building and providing software services, so financial financial infrastructure services to other customers. That's super interesting. And then you see all the other players wanting to be a bank, so to put their hands on a wallet and managing somehow the money in the wallet. So now times have changed, so we are not in a zero era anymore. So maybe something is changing in that sense, but it's really a good time to merging or going forward in merging these two worlds, the service, the physical product, the product world and the banking world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing that is interesting, which ties into what you were saying, is that according to a report from Deloitte, Italy was kind of slow in adopting slower in Europe compared to other countries like the Nordics to adopt open banking solution and to have customer actually be sensitive to open banking solution. But this is quickly changing as there is like a very powerful push from consumer behaviors. So it's actually consumer kind of becoming more and more used to use these kind of tools. So the prediction is really that there's going to be like a quick movement and a quick adaptation. So yeah, we're not the quickest mover in Europe, but definitely when we adopt something, there is like a big and interesting like shift. So that's kind of the insight here. Yeah, maybe.
Well, regulation went forward quite a bit, and as you mentioned, Bank of Italy, but the other national banks have been putting forward coordinated legislation in order to offer service providers a framework to operate with new services, with new products in the European markets. I think the FCA from the UK was the true first mover here, but I mean the others followed up quite quickly, and I think it is super interesting.
Awesome. All right. On a different note, let's shift gear quickly. And the second big news of the week, I think, was the Enea, essentially Tech, Fondazione Enea Tech and Biomedical. We've seen and we talk about them, and we keep being impressed on how quick are deploying. And they're becoming, probably some of the most active investor as of today. And the latest news is IAMA Therapeutics, neuroscience startup, raising 15 million in a growth round from Indaco, Fondazione Enea, of course, Claris, and CDP Venture Capital. So this is a company that, of course, is working in the MedTech space, basically trying to find new ways to address autism and epilepsy. And that's interesting. It's a huge round compared to what's happening usually on a weekly basis, I would say, and with some of the bigger players in MedTech. So, MedTech as a vertical is tight, is quick, few big players that are working fast and well. That's my feeling, from an outsider at least.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, the most interesting part is that Fondazione Enea Tech started investing. So it took a few years for them to actually being able to start to operate. So if you go back to our conversations from a few years back about the origin and the troubles of the foundation, it's quite interesting. But now they are deploying capital, that's for sure. So super interesting to see this speed of execution.
Awesome. All right, Nick, any notable mentions the last week?
Well, last week there were many rounds, a couple of big-ish early stage rounds, WSense and Thunder. WSense is probably the most interesting because there's a deep tech startup of developing submarine connection connectivity infrastructure, meaning Wi-Fi, Internet of Things, the ability to have things that go underwater able to communicate among themselves. So that to do this, you need a very specific approach to technology, to development, being underwater with salt and all the specific the difficulties of the underwater environment is not easy. So this is a very specific technology. Super interesting to see them continuing raising capital and developing the technology. I think that's, the sea is one of the future areas of exploration that we haven't touched upon so much up to now. So there might be some interesting future ahead of us with this technology.
Awesome. All right, this brings us to the end of this week episode. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining, and I'll see you next week then.
So Jack, take care. Ciao, everybody. See you in a week.